Good morning, everyone, and welcome to SUMA's 2021 Federal Election Forum. Thank you all for attending. It is great to have you here today. My name is Stephanie Barassa, and I am the Education and Events Coordinator with SUMA. I am new to the team, but I look forward to being your webinar facilitator as we go forward. Our next webinar will be on September 28th at 10:00 a.m., featuring a discussion on mask and vaccine mandates for municipalities. Be sure to keep an eye on the municipal update and member emails for information about future webinar opportunities. We will be recording the forum today, and a link will be sent out to all registrants within the next few days. As you know, SUMA uses Zoom. All of the icons that I'm about to describe should be located at the bottom of your screen. For your audio settings, they're at the bottom left. And if you're having problems with audio on your computer, you can use this setting to switch to phone audio. There's also a Q&A feature for your questions. Please be sure to enter your questions into the Q&A box, as questions in the chat will not be read. If you see a question in the Q&A pod that you think should be asked, click on the thumbs up button underneath the question to upvote it. Chat for comments and conversation is available, so you can send comments to just the panelists or to all the panelists and attendees. I would like to thank our webinar platform sponsor, Scheer. Scheer is your trusted insurance partner, providing the best property and liability coverage to Saskatchewan's municipalities. Thanks to Scheer's sponsorship, all SUMA webinars are now free to all members. I would now like to welcome Mayor Gerald Albers, SUMA's Vice President of Cities and Mayor for the City of Lloydminster, to introduce all the candidates and moderate today's forum.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good morning. And thank you all for joining today for the SUMA's Federal Election Forum. We're officially heading to the polls on September 20th. Leading up to that day, SUMA has and will be bringing important municipal issues to the federal forefront and compiling information on each party's platform where they stand on municipal issues so that you can decide as to where you're going to vote. As part of the campaign, we are happy to bring you today's Federal Election Forum, where we have a chance to have your questions answered by the 5 federal candidates from Saskatchewan representing the Conservative Party of Canada, the Green Party of Canada, the Liberal Party of Canada, the New Democratic Party of Canada, and the People's Party of Canada. There was a last-minute adjustment this morning, and Victor Lau will now be representing the Green Party for today instead of Naomi Hunter, as we had listed on the original webinar information. Thank you all for being here. We have held a random draw before the webinar to decide the speaking order of the candidates and who will be participating today. And I will be introducing them in that order. Before I get into the introductions, I want to thank all our candidates for taking the time to join us this morning. I know you'd be busy out on the campaign trail otherwise. I know our hometowns appreciate the opportunity to ask you about the issues important to them. Federal decisions impact every one of our communities. With us, we have today, in the order, Andrew Scheer, the Conservative Party candidate for Regina Qu'Appelle, Estelle Hjertaas with the Liberal Party candidate for Prince Albert, Rod Kletchko, sorry Rod if I mispronounced that, People's Party of Canada candidate for Regina Lewvan, Robert Doucette, the NDP candidate for Saskatoon West, and Victor Lau, the Green Party candidate for Regina Wascana. So thank you again all for joining us this morning for this debate. We will now get into the questions. Be sure to enter your questions into the Q&A pod, and we'll see if a question will get up to be answered. Click the thumbs up on the question to vote if you want to move it up to the list if you support the question. All questions should be directed towards all candidates, and questions that are directed towards a specific candidate will not be answered. So all candidates will have the opportunity to respond to each question. With an hour and a half, we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. We realize that's going to disappear fairly quickly. To get things started, SUMA has prepared one question to get us started that is based on our platform for the federal election. Each of you will have 3 minutes to answer the question you are provided in the order that we were introduced. You will have the opportunity to answer the following questions in an alternating order with 2 minutes after that. So any questions after our opening question will be 2 minutes. We will try and give you a 30-second warning, I believe, is what our intention was from SUMA, so you know that you're nearing the end. And I guess my job as the moderator, as you know, in other debates, will be to ask you to cease the mic and go from there. This is the challenge of doing it online, but I'm sure you folks are well attuned to this. So with that, I would like to start answering of the questions and look to Mr. Andrew Scheer to start us with that. Mr. Scheer, please.
Sorry, are you going to pose the question?
Okay, my apologies. I understood. Sorry, the first question that was, thank you. The first question that was, as the order of government closest to the people, municipalities understand the needs of their residents. These needs includes access to reliable broadband, ensuring the community they call home is resilient to climate change, having their infrastructure needs met, and feeling safe and supported in their community. How will your party support and work with municipalities to build safer, sustainable communities?
Well, thanks very much for the question, and thank you to SUMA as an organization for putting this on. It's I have so much respect for local councillors and mayors. You are so close to your communities, and you often meet the people who are affected by your decisions in the grocery stores and the gas stations, and so you have that kind of instant accountability for the job that you do. There's two things I want to pick up on in the question. The first is, as the order of government closest to the people. That is a very important phrase, because in Canada over the past few decades, we've seen a real consolidation of power in Ottawa, and there's an increasing sense of a top-down approach. Ottawa knows best, especially with this current Liberal government, putting in all kinds of conditions and criteria for funding programs. And when you've got bureaucrats in Ottawa who have, rarely leave their postal code, trying to decide what a Regina might need versus a Victoria or a Halifax, or even what a Wynyard might need versus a Regina, those types of Ottawa knows best approaches don't work. So our approach is flexibility, decentralization, and fewer strings. Recognizing that you all have a right to the same level of funding, and if you don't have the same unique challenges that the government program is designed for, you're going to lose out on that funding. So we want to take away that kind of those constraints that the current Liberal government have put in for funding. Also, the 5G and broadband, the broadband and connectivity issue that you mentioned. One thing the pandemic has taught us is that access to high-speed internet, reliable internet, is an essential service. And so many people have had to work from home and shift how they do their jobs. And without Zoom or these types of platforms, without the connectivity to do it, so many people have been left out of that and have suffered even more from the downturn in the pandemic restrictions than others. So our party's committed to empowering local decision making, taking away that top-down Liberal and NDP approach of Ottawa knows best, empowering local decision making, and actually getting the job done on connectivity. Those are two key components of our infrastructure plan.
Thank you, sir. I will then move to Ms. Hjertaas for the next response to that question, please.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here today, and thank you for to SUMA for organizing this. I did this last time, and it was a real pleasure to be able to chat with people about issues that affect our municipalities. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge that I'm speaking from Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. So with regard to the question, I'll just jump right into the meat of it. So with regard to broadband, the Liberal government over the last 6 years has already invested $8 billion to accelerate the delivery of high-speed internet and wireless service across Canada. But specifically to address broadband, I think this is a really good idea. Basically, what we're going to do is require those who have purchased the rights to build broadband to actually do it. So it'll be a use it or lose it approach. So if the large national carriers don't do it, then basically those rights will be auctioned off and smaller and local carriers can use it. And that way we can actually develop that and move forward. So it won't be someone just sitting and holding on to those rights anymore. The next part of the question was about resiliency and climate change. And so the Liberal climate change plan is extremely comprehensive. There's just a short overview of it in the platform, but the whole thing's available on the Government of Canada website, and it's very detailed. It's also being rated as the most effective and best climate change platform on offer in Canada. So I hope we'll talk about that more later. But one of the parts of it is $1.5 billion over 3 years for and inclusive community buildings. And also, we're going to look at Canada's first ever infrastructure review, basically beginning in 2021. And so actually take a look at all the infrastructure in Canada, what deficits do we have? And of course, a lot of that will be municipal infrastructure and how we improve that, and of course, make it compatible with a green future. And so I think that is very positive in terms of climate resiliency. We have a number of things in the platform to assist municipalities with things like flood proofing and building more resilient things, because of course we know that climate change is going to keep happening, even if we work very hard to meet our targets for the short-term future. And so we need to be ready for that. So the next part of the question was making sure that people feel safe and supported. And so there's a lot of different areas in that, but just to touch on some key ones, we've increased already OAS and GIS for seniors, and we plan to do so again because we're hearing from seniors that they still don't have enough to make ends meet. And so that's important. Also for students, no interest on student loans. I think that's a big part of supporting people. And we have a very a long detailed plan on housing. So I'll just identify the part that's maybe relevant for, oh, that's it. Thank you.
Your 30-second warning.
Sorry. So one of the parts that's relevant for municipalities is identifying empty buildings or buildings that could be repurposed to turn into housing, because we have such a housing crisis. And then, of course, there's a large portion of mental health and addictions funding, and that is, of course, part of having a safe community, addressing the social determinants of health and also of crime. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for all the panelists, that was the 30-second bell. So sorry about that, to got you on the first one. So thank you, and that's terrific. So with that, I will now move to Mr. Kletchko and let him answer that question. You have 3 minutes, sir. Please go ahead. And you're on mute yet.
Kletchko.
Kletchko?
Kletchko.
Kletchko.
Like the boxers. Remember those guys? Yeah. Anyways, thank you for allowing me to participate. I'm fairly new at this, as you know. I'm very new at this, but I welcome being able to come on here. Regarding the communities, safer, sustainable communities, I think one of the main issues to keeping a community viable is by encouraging business to the community and not discouraging business in the community. If we're going to allow a business to make a profit, it shouldn't be a bad word. Too many times people think that if somebody's not driving, am I bad-mouthing Hyundai at this point? I don't think so. But a smaller car, it's okay, but they get a bigger car and they're vilified and they're taxed even more. If you allow small business to grow in your community, what's going to happen is they're going to grow, they're going to need employees, you're going to create employment. I think that's the thing that we should be working on, instead of trying to solve all the problems in our municipalities by throwing money at it. Throwing money at a problem just doesn't work. We've seen 40 years of throwing money at problems, and we know it doesn't work. What else we got here? Make the laws should follow our Charter of Rights and Freedoms of the Canadians. We shouldn't have these laws set up based with government interference. We're all equal under the Charter, except wherein the government may ameliorate special rights and freedoms because of identity politics, because that's exactly what they're doing. They're throwing Canadians under certain little types and special interest groups. We're not going to get anywhere by that. So if we want a tight community, the first thing we should be doing is not dividing our communities into certain types, certain special interest groups, because after all, we are all Canadians, aren't we? What else did you want to hear? We've got safer communities. I know that if our laws were set the same to all Canadians instead of certain groups and certain interests, we'd be a lot better off. That's, what else do we have here? I don't know, I probably missed a few things here and there, but I think you get the point. The communities were originally built by the people that live in the communities to make their communities better. As long as the people can get involved and support their own community, and as long as you don't vilify the people who decide to start a business, we're all going to be better off. That's my plan. And I can't hear a thing you said.
There we go. Thank you very much, Mr. Kletchko. And if I can turn off my alarm, we'll get that. There we go. We'll one more time. Thank you so much. Moving to the next speaker, Mr. Doucette. I will ask you to for 3 minutes, please.
Good morning to everybody, Mayor Albers, and to everybody. I thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. Just quickly, I want to give thanks to the creator and to everybody on here. I'm the NDP candidate in Saskatoon West for people that don't know me. And, you know, in every corner of the country, families are worried about jobs, the health of our loved ones, the climate crisis, and the public services that everyone counts on. The past 18 months have shown that Canadians can confront any challenge when we have to and when we choose to, and when we come together. It has also shown us that thanks to the decisions of Liberal and Conservative governments, many of the supports that we rely on just weren't there when we needed them. If we want different results, we need to make different choices. What we need now is the courage to act together, and that is exactly what the New Democrats offer to Canadians. For example, we can make life more affordable for everyday people by investing in healthcare. Example of that. Knocking on doorsteps. I knocked on a doorstep where seniors are telling me that they now have to pay an extra $375 for their Medicare. They're having to choose between rent, drugs, and food. So this is a reality there right now. Of course, affordable housing, pharmacare, as I just mentioned, and childcare. I believe the NDP we as Canadians can build an economy that works better for more people by providing quality, affordable childcare when you need it, making employment and insurance work for you, ensuring more accessible job training and lifelong learning for all, small businesses, and we will protect family budgets and force big corporations and big polluters to start paying for what they owe. We have a detailed plan to combat the climate crisis, and that we will create good jobs in a new economy. And we will undertake the important work of reconciliation in good faith with Indigenous nations and in true and equal partnership with Indigenous communities across the country. I've had the privilege of talking about these and other priorities at the doorsteps and on the street. And I hope that today I will have another opportunity to expand on these commitments. And just with respect to empowering communities, you know, all levels of government need to have representative. You got her. All levels of government need to have a representative or voice at a national forum or a strategic planning process in order for the needs of their communities that are being heard and addressed. The role of the MP is crucial in this instance, as they are supposed to be the voice of the constituencies that they represent, and that's what the NDP bring to the table. MPs that will work with the communities and work with the municipalities and Indigenous nations to ensure that the needs of their families are met. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Lau, if you would please, you have 3 moments.
Yeah, thanks a lot to SUMA for inviting us. I'm Victor Lau. I'm the nominated candidate for Regina Wascana, representing the Green Party of Canada. Very pleased to be here. I was also the provincial leader for the Saskatchewan Green Party for a couple of terms. And yeah, we really ran on an idea of rural revitalization. And I'm really excited that the federal party took that as their basically title for what we're talking about today. I think the big thing is, I would say the Green Party is well placed. You've heard from all the other parties. And I would take some, I guess, a moment to kind of ask Mr. Scheer to try and really push the Conservative platform rather than continuing to attack the Liberal and NDP kind of governments. I mean, let's be reminded here that under Prime Minister Stephen Harper, there was very, very little infrastructure spending that was put out to, you know, the rural municipalities. I think it's best to basically focus on everybody's individual platforms and, try not to attack the other guys. I mean, the Green Party, as you may or may not know, is really into consensus building. So not only if I was honored enough to be elected as a member of parliament, let alone form government, we would basically work with everybody in their roles and capacities, right? From the mayors and townships and the provincial premiers and so on. We are talking about opening up the process to not only ordinary Canadians, but to every political party, right? We believe in a democracy that involves everybody. It's just incredible that we're continuing to deal with things like this in a partisan fashion, when in reality, we really should be working together, especially on the climate crisis. I mean, we've seen from the IPCC report that just came out a couple of weeks ago, it's red alert for humanity. And yet, I'm a little disappointed considering, the environment isn't a key issue. I'm glad that SUMA brought it up. I mean, the infrastructure needs go beyond just repairing bridges, adding in new infrastructure for water. It's basically transitioning our entire province, let alone the whole country, away from oil and gas. And yet we're still talking about oil and gas. We're still talking about the industry that helped build our country, but we need to move away from that. I mean, anyway, it's just perplexing. We need to have real discussions. I tend to think the Green Party is the most nonpartisan party. I think that's why we deserve to form government, at least elect some MPs to bring that to the table. And I think, I would summarize it in this way. We are the closest to the Elon Musk vision of the world. We are going to use technology that exists to bring empowerment to the citizens and allow the citizens have their say, not just the politicians. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. All right, with that, we have our first question from our listening audience and viewing audience. So we're asking you to respond with 2 minutes on the clock is what you'll be given for the response. And we're going to move to Ms. Hjertaas to start with and then move through the list that way. So the question, Ms. Hjertaas and the other panelists are, what will your party do to address the divides in our country, particularly between the East and the West? Please go ahead.
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's the increasing polarization in Canada is something that we are seeing. So first, I just want to say I'm from Saskatchewan, born and raised here. I did spend 10 years living in Ontario, Quebec, and I've traveled all across Canada. And I think that at our core, all Canadians really have the same values and care about the same things. We all want, good jobs. We want opportunities for our children. We want safe communities. So we're not that different from each other once we go there. And I certainly hope that there can be more opportunities to build bridges. There used to be kind of exchange programs for young people, things like that, that do create a lot of opportunities for people to meet people from across the country and see maybe the similarities and the differences between us. But one of the things I think we need to do is make sure that all areas of Canada receive support. And the federal government has been doing that. And so infrastructure investment in Saskatchewan in particular, also Alberta and the other Western provinces has been very high, and so has general investment. So for example, out of COVID, 8 out of $10 of money that was used to fight COVID in Saskatchewan was federal money. That's a big investment in the province, including in our healthcare system. And we've invested a lot in all kinds of different infrastructure. So I keep rough track of things in my writing, but all kinds of stuff from landfills, water treatment plants, recreation centers, even, the new dressing room in an arena so that the hockey teams can play. And that's something the federal government has already been doing. I think that perhaps not doing the best job of advertising it, and then people have a perception that Saskatchewan and the West aren't getting any investment. And I'm not sure exactly how to counteract that, but I think the party has done a great job of investing in all parts of Canada and making sure that everyone's needs are met. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hjertaas. And I will now move to Mr. Kletchko to respond to that question.
I forgot she muted me. Anyways, very, very interesting question there. What I like to look at that is the current mainstream parties are doing the same thing they've always done. They're saying this certain sector should get this. This special interest group should have this. What about Canadians as a whole? The current parties have a bad habit, a very bad habit of splitting the people up with all of their policies that they've got. Like identity politics, they'll find an issue. I'm not going to name all the issues, but the people out there know. They'll take an issue, they'll study it, and they will take that issue and throw it at the Canadian people, knowing it's going to divide them. It'll divide them in half, 60-40, whatever they want. At the PPC party, we're not about dividing people. We're not about identity politics, because as far as we're concerned, we're all the same people. We've got a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I'm going to refer to that again, where if we're all equal, why does the government have the right to make special rights and freedoms for certain special interest groups? There should be one law for all the people of Canada. And if you want to find that law, you've got to vote PPC.
There we are. Thank you very much, Mr. Kletchko.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Mr. Doucette, if you would please, for the question that was posed. You're still muted.
Sorry. Yeah. Just to answer it quickly, I think as prospective MPs that will be going to Ottawa, we need to look at a couple of things. We need to actually look how we bridge this partisan divide and work more together on common issues that Canadians are faced with. I think that's one of the things. And I think that as I've seen on knocking on the doorsteps and talking with people, that's what Canadians want to see. They want to see people working. They want to see issues dealt with. And they also want to see relevant issues that are impacting them or being answered. Just to give an example, I think it's important that as a member of Parliament that they take the message of their constituencies and the people that live there and work on the issues that are of importance to those individuals. Just as an example, in my riding, we have a lot of issues: the opioid epidemic, Aboriginal homelessness, seniors, as I had mentioned, that just aren't making it, and affordability. These are issues that are of importance to Canadians, and these are the issues that we need to bring together in Ottawa on behalf of Canadians and look to resolve those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. Mr. Lau, if you would, please.
Thank you so much for the question. I think I would reframe it less between the East and West. I know a lot of media stories have come about talking about this, but I mean, I've had the experience of campaigning right across the country for the Green Party. And if you talk to ordinary men and women across this country, they feel they want to be Canadian. They want to be proud. I think Mr. Kletchko from the PPC talks about it correctly. We all want to be seen as being treated equally under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. My parents came here. I was born as a Canadian. I feel very privileged to be a Canadian. But over time, we've seen a federal government that doesn't matter whether it's conservative or liberal, they've lost control of where they're supposed to be, representing the people, right? They basically represent their special interests. Basically, big corporate donors, special interests that basically buy their largesse. I think this is why the PPC party talks about, getting back to basics, right? And I think the Green Party of Canada, if we were fortunate enough to form government, would start working at that, creating national projects that bring national unity. We could basically create renewable energy projects so that we can have 100% clean energy for every Canadian. Work to build jobs right across this country. One of our biggest ideas that I'm hopeful the national government and the Parliament of Canada will deal with is implementing a guaranteed national livable income for all Canadians. We, in one small movement, can basically eliminate 50% poverty in 1 year. And the Conservatives would say, well, that hasn't been costed out, but it has been costed out by the parliamentary budget officer. I'm kind of asking people to support this idea, because whoever forms government should really look at things like this to bring unity, universality in programming. I think we can bring all Canadians back together and stop the division that is put out there by the media. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Mr. Scheer, you have 2 moments.
Well, thanks very much for the question. And I'm hearing this at a lot of doors. And, there's nothing more frustrating for people in Saskatchewan when we hear Justin Trudeau's team talk about the need for national unity. Justin Trudeau has divided this country like no other prime minister in Canadian history. He has attacked Western Canada. He has attacked the energy sector that provides so many jobs for so many people in Saskatchewan and Alberta. The very first week of the election campaign, he came to Saskatchewan and threatened to claw back Saskatchewan's healthcare transfers for something that Ontario and Quebec also do. Now, Trudeau would never threaten the Premier of Quebec or the Premier of Ontario with clawing back their healthcare transfers. We've seen pipelines canceled, throwing hundreds of people out of work in my own riding, Evraz Steel, and companies that are related to it. So the key to restoring national unity is respect for each region and recognizing that every province in this country, every region of this country has the right to do what it does best. And in Saskatchewan, that means agriculture, it means natural resources. And I think Trudeau Liberals always get confused when they talk about what the people of this province want. The Liberal candidate mentioned the government spending that has gone on at the federal level here in Saskatchewan. Well, that pales in comparison to the billions of dollars of economic activity that have been killed by this Liberal government. People of Saskatchewan want to work. They want to get back to work in the energy sector. We need to respect our agricultural producers. That's why only Conservatives are talking about real drought relief. And that's the key to national unity, is not pitting one region against each other the way Justin Trudeau has done.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. We're moving on to a new question, and I encourage our viewers to continue to send questions forward. The next question I'd like to pose, and I'll be starting with Mr. Kletchko, moving through the list. The question that I'm posing to the panelists are, as we have learned from the pandemic, we have seen how much we can achieve when we work together. We need strong representation for the prairie provinces to continue advocating for our needs, which are very different from our eastern counterparts. How do you plan to keep open communication with municipalities as well as organizations such as, and I'll expand on those for some of those, it's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, known as FCM, SUMA, Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association, and SARM, Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities. So, Mr. Kletchko, would you please? Just working through, there you are.
There we go. Okay. That's a very good question. Tell you the truth, I haven't gone into that. It's been a very, very busy campaign. Something that a lot of people weren't happy with. I mean, launching a campaign right in the middle of a COVID crisis the way we are, and then we're trying to get all of our individuals out there campaigning. Anyways, getting back to the question, I think the best way that we can get communications going through right across Canada is, first of all, we can't separate Canada by borders. I mean, just because we have the freedom to move outside of borders, and even with this COVID situation that we have right now, if we're having to carry papers with us in order to cross from one border to another, we've got to address those issues. How do we address those issues? We've got to have more meeting. We've got to have talks with it. And we've got to have a media that will actually report the truth. I talk to so many people right now, and what they tell me is they don't know what the truth is. They doubt the media. And once we don't have a media we can trust, especially in this day and age, how are we supposed to move forward with our friends and neighbors right across Canada? Because after all, we are all Canadians. I think that's a good place to start. And I'll leave it off to my the other representatives here.
Thank you, Mr. Kletchko. Mr. Doucette, you're next up on that question.
What's the question again? Sorry.
The
Can you just
question
repeat
is,
it?
certainly. We have all learned from the pandemic that we have seen how much we can achieve when we work together. We need strong representation for the prairie provinces to continue advocating for our needs, which is very different from our eastern counterparts. How do you plan to keep open communication with municipalities as well as organizations such as FCM, SUMA, and SARM?
Well, thank you for that question, Mr. Mayor. You know, it's imperative MPs work with municipalities, community-based organizations, and Indigenous governments through a couple things, strategic, and also just to have those discussions about what they need. We see across this country that you know, we're all Canadians, and we all have similar issues. There is no east or west for me as running an MP. Yes, the West has certain issues, and we see we're discussing that today. And the East has certain issues. But at the end of the day, I think all of us could agree that we all need to come together and work in the best interest of Canadians. And just to give an example, if the people in the East are feeling alienated, or people in the West are feeling alienated, try being in where you see the highest incarceration rates, the highest rates of poor health, the highest rates of infant mortality. You know, all of these issues are in front of our Aboriginal homelessness. These are issues that affect all communities. So, you know, if I were to answer that, I would say that all MPs across all party lines need to sit down with the municipalities of their province, I guess, and the other groups, the community-based organizations, Indigenous organizations, and SUMA and SARM, and actually represent them on their issues, because we see that a great many MPs go to Ottawa and they are not in Ottawa opening doors. They are not working really on behalf of their communities or the issues of their constituents. They're there to hold the party line, and I think that by working on an issue just like pharmacare, which the Liberals and the Conservatives voted against, which is having a negative impact on everyday Canadians, we need to come up with a process that we put Canadian people forward first, rather than party lines.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. Mr. Lau, if you would please to respond to the question.
Yeah, very happy to hear. Some of us are starting to get it. We're all Canadians, right? Mr. Doucette mentions it properly. Like, whoever forms the next government should try and move and remove as much of the partisanship as possible. We have a climate crisis. We have so many needs that have been unmet because of you know, basically 2 years of Justin Trudeau's minority government unwilling to work with opposition members. He tries to stack committees. I'll answer this question in 2 steps. If I was fortunate enough to become the member of parliament for Regina Wascana, I would sit down with all the other 13 MPs from Saskatchewan, whether they're Conservative, Liberal, NDP, or otherwise, PPC. Let's get together and form a 14-member caucus. Irregardless of our political divides, we should be able to work as MPs to serve Saskatchewan, right? The Conservatives talk about standing up for Saskatchewan. That is such an ignorant comment. Like, do you think Mr. Doucette would not stand up for Saskatchewan? I'm sure the PPC member would stand up for Saskatchewan. I mean, there are many more viewpoints than just the Conservative viewpoint. We need to start working together. I'm not saying that the Liberals have done everything right. Obviously, that's why we're all campaigning here, to try and win some seats. At the national level, if we form the Green Party government, we would open up all the committees to all the parties that are represented in the House of Commons, perhaps even unelected. Let's remove as much of the partisanship and work to build, specifically to answer the question about making sure that we keep open communication. This is what I think I would do as a Green Party member of Parliament. I would push my party in government to make sure that the list of demands that FCM, SUMA, and SARM and others, we make it published. We have a Minister of Rural Revitalization, and we basically would be accountable to you. Open, accountable, transparent government. I campaigned on that provincially, and I'm going to take that to Ottawa federally. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Moving on to the list, Mr. Scheer, would you please respond to the question?
Yeah, just very briefly, because Mr. Lau brought up our campaign slogan here in Saskatchewan about how the Conservatives are always on Saskatchewan's side. He asked if I didn't think that other candidates would be on Saskatchewan's side, and the answer is, of course they wouldn't be. We had for years and years in this province a Liberal member who always voted against Saskatchewan. When you look at Ralph Goodale's record and the record of this Liberal government, they canceled Northern Gateway, and the Liberal member of Parliament for Saskatchewan said nothing. Cancelled Energy East, the pipeline that would have brought Western Canadian energy into Eastern Canadian markets, displacing foreign oil, and the Liberal member of Parliament voted against Energy East. When the attack on small businesses were going on, again, the Liberals voted, the Liberal member of Parliament for Saskatchewan voted in favor of those attacks on small business. And when you look at the NDP platforms, it's the same thing, never taking Saskatchewan's side on all the key issues. It's only the Conservative Party that is standing up for our farmers, standing up for our community, standing up for our oil and gas workers that have been under attack. Now, when it comes specifically to relationships with the communities that are mentioned in the question, I've got the last split riding between a large city in Saskatchewan with rural communities. So I deal a lot with SUMA and a lot with SARM, and as infrastructure shadow minister, also with the FCM. And one of the things I've always appreciated from those groups is the policy development. And it's thanks to the good work at SARM that we've been able to include in our platform things that will help farmers and producers get better access to inputs. It's because of the work of SUMA that in the previous Conservative government, we made sure that there were set aside funding for infrastructure for smaller communities so that smaller towns didn't have to compete with the larger cities. They had their own envelope of funding to make sure that they got their fair share. So my commitment is to always have those strong relationships, those open lines of communications with the organizations SARM, SUMA, and FCM.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Ms. Hjertaas, if you would, you have 2 moments to answer the question.
Thank you. So the question is about how we would work with municipalities and FCM, SUMA, and SARM. And so I just wanted to highlight examples in the Liberal platform that specifically address this. And I think we have shown as the government of the last 6 years, the willingness to meet with stakeholders, including provinces and territories and municipalities and various other stakeholders. So, for example, with regard to the RCMP, the platform specifically talks about working with municipalities that contract RCMP services to make the service better and integrate it with other support workers. We also see that with what I mentioned before, working with municipalities to identify underused property to convert to housing. Also see that in the section on fresh water, which would work with municipalities to regulate boating and if they have a relevant body of water there. Also with regard to the retrofit economy, so helping communities do multiple retrofits in the same area at the same time, which would cost less, and that's something that would be community-led. And there's a national food policy for children, which again would be something community-led. And so I think we've seen there are a number of examples specifically in the platform where the federal government would be looking to work with municipalities. And I think that is a very positive indication of the willingness to work with all of these organizations in general. I just want to briefly address Mr. Scheer's comments about Mr. Goodale's record. And I think that it would be fair to say that there is huge investment in Saskatchewan and support for Saskatchewan that came from his advocacy. Just with regard to pipelines, those pipelines didn't go ahead for a variety of reasons, but the federal government did purchase the Trans Mountain pipeline to ensure that it would go ahead. And on a totally separate note, when addressing the other members' comments, corporate donations have been illegal in Canada for almost 20 years, and only individuals can make donations to federal political parties.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our next question. Question number 3, and I'll be starting with you, Mr. Doucette, for a response, please. The question is, transparency is strongly pushed for municipalities and is 100% the correct path. What will your party do to increase the transparency at the federal level? Mr. Doucette, if you would, please.
Thank you very much for that question. I think that there's a number of levels with respect to that question. On an MP level, I think it's important that you engage your community and you get your direction from your community, and you also report back to your community on what you're doing. And just as an example, we have MPs that are doing acting on behalf of our constituencies. And I'll just give an example with the LGBTQ two-spirited community. We had our MP, Mr. Redekop, vote against banning conversion therapy, and so did 13 of the 14. They voted against banning conversion therapy. And you know, as a father that has a two-spirited daughter, that really, well, it upsets me. And so now we've got the Conservative Party acting like they're the LGBTQ two-spirited supporters across the country. No, you know, we need at that MP level, we need to ensure that the decisions that are made by MPs in Ottawa are reflected, and they have to be accountable on a more level in Ottawa. I think that you know, that as I've said previously, that for all the decisions or platforms that each party is presenting, they need to have a clear accountability or framework that Canadians can understand and rely on, that's relevant to them, and to ensure that the issues that they're pushing forward is something that Canadians can really build their families on. And so I think that across this country, the NDP have led that way in terms of reporting to Canadians what their plan is, what they're going to cost, and how it's going to benefit Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette.
Thank you.
Moving on to Mr. Lau. Mr. Lau, if you'd like to answer the question.
Yeah, this is a good one. I think we have the technology. We probably have had the technology for a long time. We need to use what I call the OAT principles. The new Parliament of Canada should immediately implement an open and accountable and transparent procedures for all legislative acts, right? We should not be able to have non-recorded voting of members of Parliament, right? When you look up how your member of Parliament voted, you should know. In fact, using the technology, all the bills should be listed, and there should be basically specific breakdown of how you're a member of Parliament voted. You can also have how many Green Party members voted this way or against, how many Conservative Party members voted this way or against the bill. We need more and more accountability. I mean, you know, you talk to any young person nowadays, they're all on social media, they're all on their smartphones. We all have one of these things, right? Nowadays, we can solicit basically information, you know, at a touch of the smartphone, right? So why can't our huge government that spends over $300 billion and more every year not be able to be accountable, right? They ask us, you know, we go door knock and ask for everybody's vote, and then the members of Parliament or the MLAs or whatever, they disappear, right? I mean, we need accountability day in and day out at the federal level, especially because they're so removed from the West. It is really just horrifying. I mean, we've seen good people go from the West into the Parliament, like a lot of reformers that had good intentions of changing Ottawa. Instead, they got changed. So Ottawa obviously is a very corrupting place. I think we need to remove, you know, political contributions from the private individuals and corporations and unions, and we need to basically have political funding that is allocated specifically from basically our general taxes and limit that spending. So. Yeah, more accountability all around. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Mr. Scheer, it's your opportunity for 2 minutes to respond to that question.
Sure, very briefly, two quick things. Just maybe Mr. Lau can give you a call after this forum, and I can show you on the Parliamentary of Canada website where all the voting records are contained, and it's all there. Every vote that I participate in is listed there for all to see. But I will agree with him that we need more accountability. Just very briefly, Mr. Doucette as well said something that was erroneous. All members of Parliament, all parties supported a ban on conversion therapy. It was when the Liberals decided to politicize that bill and add in language that would criminalize conversations between parents and other types of community leaders, between people who may have been going to seek some kind of guidance. There are many of us in the party that had concerns with the impact on free speech and the rights of LGBT individuals to seek whatever kind of guidance or counseling or conversations that they like, and we didn't want to infringe on their rights. And unfortunately, the Liberals refused to remove that language from their bill. When we're talking about accountability in this government, we look at how Justin Trudeau treated Jody Wilson-Raybould, refused to allow her to fully testify, keeping many aspects of what went on with the SNC-Lavalin affair secret. Our party is committed to doing things like increasing the penalties for politicians who are caught breaking ethics rules. I think we're up to number 3 for Mr. Trudeau. And unfortunately, the NDP voted with the Liberals. Unfortunately, the NDP took Justin Trudeau's side and voted against further investigations into Justin Trudeau scandals as it relates to the WE organizations. Our party is committed to doing things like increasing the turnaround times for access to information requests. A lot of investigations into government spending are thwarted by long delays in providing that information to journalists or other members of parliament or the public. So those are the types of things that we're pushing for to increase accountability and increase transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Ms. Hjertaas, your opportunity to respond to the question.
Thank you. So first, I think transparency begins with having a fully costed platform, which we do have. And then from there, as Mr. Scheer correctly pointed out, a lot of this information is already available on various government websites. So for example, if you look at an issue that's very topical right now, drinking water advisories on reserve, on the Indian Affairs website, you can actually see the list of all the drinking water advisories, what steps have been taken, how much money has been spent, and how many have been lifted, which is 116, by the way. And so that information is there. I think there's probably a good point about ways to make it more easily accessible, because not everyone has the time to search and look for those things. There's a few things in the platform about kind of moving forward on that. And one of the things is looking to create a comprehensive strategic policy review of all government programs to look at what the effectiveness of these programs are in terms of meeting our goals, in terms of addressing climate change and whether they help Canadians. And that kind of exercise is an exercise in transparency and looking at all of that. Now, I think some of the other friends on this call made some great points about MPs being accountable to their community, and I think we need the local MP not to kind of take that support for granted and to actually be, when they're not in Ottawa, be home and be active in the community and visible so they can be spoken to. Just with regard to that kind of thing, I think that what we've seen from this Liberal government was a big change in focus. It's been 6 years now, so maybe people forget. But that the ministers are always open to talking to the media. And what we saw in the previous Conservative government was that they did not speak to the media, and really that stifled any kind of investigations into that. And I just want to note on conversion therapy, I'm a criminal lawyer. I'm an expert on this. The current bill does not criminalize conversations, and that argument is nonsensical. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hjertaas. Mr. Kletchko, you have the opportunity to answer that question. Did you need me to read it again for you, sir?
Am I there? I just thought I was being censored by what the Apple. Anyways, it's very, very interesting, that question, because we're talking about clarity or being able to know what's going on in Ottawa. First thing I would do, and first thing I've always wondered, is what actually happened to the Trans Mountain Pipeline? We don't know. Where did the money come from to purchase that Trans Mountain Pipeline? I think people should be able to research that and find out where the money came from. How is the housing project in Mumbai, India? We haven't heard about that one for, what, 3 years now? That project in Mumbai cost taxpayers $2 billion from their CPP plan. We need transparency out of Ottawa. We have to know where the money is going. 6 years ago, in the first few months of the Liberal Party ruling Canada, they gave away billions and billions and billions of dollars. Whatever happened to those projects? Whatever happened to those billions of dollars? I like hearing what the opposition parties are saying right now, The only thing that I'd like to know is I'd like to know what happened to all the money. Follow the money, get some reports, and tell the people. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kletchko. I have another question from our viewing audience, which I appreciate very much. Mr. Lau, you will be the first up to answer this. I will read the question. It is fairly long, so if, towards the end, if the other respondents would like, panelists would like me to read it again, I will. The question is, my village has a population under 250, including children and seniors. Our tax base is a smaller number. I would like to hear your thoughts on federal grant opportunities, particularly infrastructure grants. Would your party considering hiring regional professionals at the federal government expense, whose job is to respond to grant requirements in order to level the field for rural and remote communities who do not have the resources available in our few cities? And I believe that's in around the grant application writing to qualify. I'll add that. So Mr. Lau, if you would, please.
Yeah, I was federal. I was fortunate enough to have worked for MP Aaron Weir, as a constituency assistant. So I had my, personal perception of the federal government on the outside, but having worked as a constituency assistant on the inside, I can tell all Canadians, everyone here, it's a lot worse than you think it is. Let me tell you, dealing with the bureaucrats in Ottawa, it is very pleasant when you have a good conversation with the other person on the other end, and they are desperately trying to work with you to fix the constituents' problems. But when you have somebody that doesn't care or doesn't think they need to do anything to help your constituents, it's just abysmal. And specifically to writing grants, I was part of a community association for 10 years, and we struggled to try and fill in these grant forms. Both the Liberals and Conservatives need to be held accountable for creating some of the worst application proposals, politicizing application proposals, right? I believe it was Justin Trudeau that tried to say, well, if you're going to be a faith-based group and advocate, against, having women's rights, well, then, you can't fill in this proposal. So basically, community organizations that basically had been getting grants for many years suddenly got left out. So once again, the Green Party talks about depoliticizing, removing as much as possible the partisanship. And I agree. I personally think we have government officials that should be basically helping communities get access. I really wonder about whether or not we can simplify these grant proposals. We should be direct representatives getting the money for the communities, and instead of putting people trying to, find the resources or the ability to write these grant proposals. It is a bunch of bureaucracy. It maintains bureaucrats' jobs. I'm all for getting rid of that and direct democracy. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Moving on, Mr. Scheer, you have the opportunity.
Yeah, just very briefly for the Liberal candidate, I can send her all kinds of concerns that were raised from people in the legal community about C6, and especially the fact that the Department of Justice explanatory note where it tried to make the case for protecting the expanse of that into infringing on freedom of speech and criminalizing conversations. We just asked for that explanatory note to be put into the legislation to clarify that. The Liberals decided not to do that. Our government, when Conservatives were in government, we prided ourselves in empowering local decision making and making sure that smaller communities didn't have to compete with the larger centers for that funding. You've got villages, I've got many of them in my riding, small tax base, a lot of great people coming together to keep the smaller towns alive and vibrant, and they don't always have the expertise. And I will agree with something that Mr. Lau said about the complexity of the applications, the red tape that has bogged down so many programs. And one of the things that the Liberal government has been just roasted for is their failure to be able to get the money out the door. The Auditor General found all kinds of problems within the infrastructure department. The parliamentary budget officer said there were tens of thousands of projects that were missing. There was no evidence that they were meeting objectives, that they were even being completed. And of course, the Canadian Infrastructure Bank that Justin Trudeau created, which has turned into the largest source of corporate welfare in our country's history. It hasn't been getting shovels out the door. There hasn't been a single dollar of private sector investment leveraged from the taxpayers' money that has been put into that. Our commitment in this campaign campaign is to facilitate smaller communities and large centers from getting the infrastructure dollars that they need quickly and reducing the complexity of the application process, that you don't need to hire high-priced consultants just to fill out forms to access funding.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Ms. Hjertaas, you have 2 moments to respond to the question.
Thank you. So I think it is important to address the needs of small municipalities, and there are quite a few of them in my riding. And one example of funding that actually does address this is it's called asset management funding. So for example, in my riding, the regional municipality of Moose Range got, I think it was about $36,000, and that was to help them with their asset management. So basically looking at the article that was written about at the time, the goal is to help local decision makers have more knowledge and more information when it comes to deciding when and how to improve infrastructure. And so that's the kind of direct support that we need for smaller communities like RMs and so on. And there's a quote there from FCM talking about how this was a strong federal municipal partnership for that kind of program, and that's very positive. So I think those are things that we're already doing to address that. And if we're not meeting the needs of smaller communities, I think we certainly need to look at that, because obviously they have very important needs. I'm thinking of, communities in my riding, like Beatty, for example, that has only about 30 homes in the actual town. And so that's not very big, and they still need the infrastructure there. I also want to point out that this government created 2 specific regional development agencies for the West. So one is for the prairies and one is for BC. And so that's also something else that's responding specifically to needs of the Western provinces. So on that note, like I said, I think if there need to do more to make sure that smaller communities have that, I'm certainly open to that. I don't think it's addressed clearly in the platform that I've seen, but we have already taken steps to address those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kletchko, you have 2 moments to respond.
Sorry about that. It's simple. It's really simple. Answer the phone. Pick up the phone. Talk to your client. Talk to the public and give them an answer. Don't tell them you're going to reach out to them and you never hear from them again. People give up. They get so frustrated, you give up. Nowadays, you try and phone your bank or talk to anybody at the bank. You have to actually go down to the bank, because otherwise you're wasting half a day trying to get through. Now try and get through on a government program. No assistance. The people are put on voicemail. And then when they try to act on an issue, what do? They throw money at it. You don't throw money at a problem, you fix the problem. Too many promises made and promises broken. We've seen that for 6 years now. We have to change that. We have to take a look at the real issue and move in and fix it. It doesn't help when you throw money that only addresses 5% of the population. What about the other 95%? We have to start getting people that aren't just going to say, we'll reach out for you, and people that are going to keep their promises. We have the same old promises. You go back 40 years, it's the same thing. They make the same old promises. They use the same old words, verses, and sentences, and there's nothing done. We're still where we were.
Thank you, Mr. Kletchko. Mr. Doucette, you have the final word on this question.
Yes, thank you for the question. And coming from a background of working in the community-based organizations and being president of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan for 10 years, and working with Indigenous organizations for well over 30 years, we include working with small villages, northern municipalities, and other Indigenous organizations, and cities in SUMA. We can see that all of these, what we're really talking about is smaller villages here, and community-based organizations, and organizations like Indigenous organizations that are having a tough time because they don't have the expertise, so to speak. But, you know, I think that these organizations need help with the bureaucratic processes. And just to give you an example, filling out forms can be a daunting thing, you know. Processing right now, grants takes a long time, and money flows too slow. And sometimes it just comes in too late. And and we've all dealt with this. You at the end of the fiscal year, with one month left, the federal government says, "Hey man, I've got $1 million, but you need to spend it in 2 weeks." You know, it's ridiculous. And so, you know, I think that it's important that MPs and members of parliament, people that are at the ground level, that are representing those villages, those northern municipalities, Indigenous organizations, and the small CBOs, they need to help their constituencies. And we need to have a federal government with their agencies have processes that are not complicated. We need multi-year funding agreements for villages, northern municipalities, Indigenous organizations, and CBOs. And I would say one final thing. I think seed money should be offered to help those smaller villages and organizations to ensure that those forms of grants are done properly for the benefit of their constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. We have another question that's come in, and I will be going to Mr. Scheer to start with. We've made it all the way around. So here we go. The question that's been posed: what are the party strategies for, and I'll say it, what are your party strategy for eliminating the deficit while still maintaining a strong economy? Mr. Scheer.
Well, we're the only party that's even talking about returning to balanced budgets, and I just want to take a few moments to articulate why that's so important. Justin Trudeau has added more to Canada's national debt than all the other prime ministers put together in our country's history. I mean, that is unbelievable when you consider that. 2 world wars, the Great Depression of the 20s and 30s, and Trudeau's beaten all of that. And where has he got the money to pay for it all? Well, he's printing it. The Bank of Canada started off printing $5 billion worth of new money every week at the start of the pandemic, and they're still printing billions and billions of new dollars without any economic activity to back it. And that we're already seeing the cost of that with rampant inflation. Trudeau's deficits mean that prices are going up because the new money is flooding our system, and that's pushing prices of everyday essentials up. That's putting a huge squeeze on Canadians. That's why we need to get back to balanced budgets. We can't afford more reckless spending. Your purchasing power of your dollar is going to keep going down dramatically if Trudeau gets reelected. The way we're going to do that is by responsibly winding down the programs that were put in place during the pandemic. We supported those types of programs to help Canadians get through the worst parts of that. But as the economy reopens, we need to make sure that there's always that there are never penalties for people returning to work and obtaining available work. So that's why we need to have that approach. In addition, we're going to stop the corporate welfare that the Trudeau Liberals have become famous for. Remember when they gave millions of dollars to Loblaws to buy fridges, or $50 million to MasterCard? They've given hundreds of millions of dollars to large for-profit energy companies. We're going to stop giving big bucks out to well-connected corporations, put that towards balancing the budget so that we can get a control on inflation.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Ms. Hjertaas, your opportunity to answer the question.
Thank you. So in terms of the balancing the budget, of course, there had been a plan to return to balanced budget, and the COVID-19 pandemic sort of pushed that aside. And I think that the spending that happened during the pandemic was appropriate. We needed to be supporting workers, businesses, communities, and keeping everybody safe, and of course, getting vaccines for everyone. And so that was an unforeseen cost, but I think that it was something that needed to be done. Ultimately, we can't really move forward on balancing the budget until the pandemic is under control. Obviously, in Saskatchewan right now, we have more cases than we've ever had before. It's not under control, so we need to keep having the supports for Canadians at this time. And until we have the pandemic under control, we won't have, we won't have any certainty. We'll still have overcapacity hospitals, possible lockdowns, uncertainty for businesses. So it's difficult for people to plan ahead until that time. So once we have COVID under control, then we can move forward on that. In terms of plans to ameliorate our financial situation. One of the things that was announced in this platform is to increase the corporate tax rate on Canada's largest banks and insurers that have done very well during the pandemic and made quite a lot of money, basically making sure everybody pays their fair share. There's also things like, since 2015, we increased taxes on the top 1% of earners, so the middle class could get a tax break. We also closed tax loopholes used by wealthy individuals and companies, like the stock option deduction, and modernized the tax system to recognize the importance of digital tech giants and make sure that Canadian companies can compete with them. And we're also working to set a global minimum corporate tax rate so that people can't move around to avoid paying taxes. So all of those actions are things that will work towards balancing the budget. But like I said, the first priority is getting through this crisis and supporting Canadians to make sure that they have what they need, that they can stay safe, keep their homes and keep their businesses going. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Hjertaas. Moving to Mr. Kletchko, it's your opportunity to respond to the question.
There you go. Where should I start on that? Well, I guess, Andrew, the first thing I've got to mention is the PPC party wants to balance the budget in 4 years. I mean, you might not have heard that anywhere because for the first 3 weeks of this campaign, the PPC was actually referred to as other, but the other party wants to balance the budget in 4 years. By canceling such things as the GST, canceling such things as the federal transfer payments to the provinces for medical services, we feel we will be able to do that. And by canceling these taxes on the people, the economy will grow. So that's certainly doable over a 4-year period. What else did we have here? Sorry, I lost that. What was the question again?
The question was, what are your party's strategies for eliminating the deficit while maintaining a strong economy?
Yeah, well, certainly lowering taxes, because once I noticed the Liberal Party representative keeps saying we're going to tax this group, we're going to tax that group, we're going to tax this group. Well, we certainly know the more you tax any certain group, the more they're going to have their back up against the wall. That doesn't work. You want big corporation to hire people. You don't back them into a corner because they're going to rebel. You don't do that to the middle class, and you don't do that to the struggling entrepreneur. All you're going to do is keep them from doing less, or they're going to invest elsewhere. If we want to build this country up again, we have to invest in our company, our country.
Thank you, Mr. Kletchko.
Okay.
Mr. Doucette, it's your opportunity.
Thank you, brother. The NDP believe in balanced budgets, but we also understand that Canadians need to live in a sustainable way. People are working harder than ever to make ends meet, and they want life to be a little easier. Affordability is a huge issue right now, and I hear it every day on the doorstep. People are having to make choices between, as I said earlier, food, rent, a mortgage payment, a student loan, all of these things. But when I look at it, the overall records of some of my brothers and sisters that are on this, under the Conservative governments of Mulroney and Harper, deficits rose to record levels. And in this term, the Liberals voted against a 1% tax on wealth, over 20 million, and refused to tax companies that have profiteered during the pandemic. The $78 billion that rich companies had made during the pandemic. I mean, where's taxes on that? They stood by while grocery chains made record profits and clawed back the pandemic pay from frontline workers. And so, the NDP believe in a fair tax system that invests in services people need by ensuring the ultra rich or wealthy and corporations pay their fair share of tax, getting rid of tax loopholes for the richest of corporations. And we see some of them with these offshore accounts and not really being accountable to our constituencies in this and these provinces, and that money goes out into other countries, and we never see it. And we need to get tough on tax evasion and tax avoidance by bigger corporations, and ensure that everybody pays ouched. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. Mr. Lau, I'll look to you, sir.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's two parts to this question. There's the deficit and also maintaining a strong economy. In terms of the deficit, I would like to remind everybody here that it was the Liberals that obviously overspent in this COVID pandemic, huge money put out into the economy, and a lot of it is unaccountable for, right? I mean, they literally went 1 year without a budget. I think that's the first time since the World War that a federal government in Canada has been allowed to do this. But let's go back to the Stephen Harper Conservative government. They basically ran deficits in every single year they were in power, 2 minority parliaments and then 1 majority government. So really, I mean, you can't really vote blue and expect balanced budgets. You can't vote red and expect balanced budgets. They're both going to do the same thing. I think the PPC has already pointed this out. I think it is time for change. I think Parliament needs new parties in there to try and shake up the entire House of Commons. But specifically about the deficit, I'll give you this news. The Parliamentary Budget Officer is a very small news media, but they said, look, the government of Canada as structured could eliminate it in 4 years. Like, there's so much money coming in that if we wanted to basically trim off all the extra spending that Justin Trudeau has put out there, the budget would balance itself in 4 years. So there's no panic here. But while we're going through a COVID economic recovery, and I would argue we need a green economic recovery, you talk about a strong economy, we talk about a compassionate economy. The Green Party of Canada wants to build back better, wants to work with all the other parties to include their ideas and basically bring not only the House of Commons together, but bring the country together to build back better. I think the guaranteed livable income would solve a lot of the problems. It would put $90 billion out there in people's hands, and the economy, it's been predicted, would grow by 120 billion. So you're going to get a lot more money back by investing in people and making sure they don't lose their cars, their mortgages, their homes, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's there. Let's just work together to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Ladies and gentlemen, panelists, and those that are in the viewing audience, we're at 11:17, and I won't have enough time to give everyone an equal opportunity for a question. So with that, I think that I would like to call and ask our panelists to wrap up, that it's the time we have to end for questions. I'd like to invite all our candidates to make closing remarks. You will each have 2 minutes to summarize any final thoughts, and we'll start with Mr. Lau. I'm reversing the order from start to finish, so you were the last to speak, Mr. Lau, at the beginning, so I'll give you the first opportunity and I'll work around that schedule. So Mr. Lau, you have 2 minutes to close.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us. We really appreciate being invited to panels like this so that ordinary Canadians, people that are involved in their communities, can hear about our platform. As you've heard today, I believe the Green Party of Canada is the only party that rises above partisanship. We're willing to work with all the other parties in the House of Commons to bring about the changes that I believe and my party believes are needed for the 21st century, to move Canada away from the old economy and into the new economy that will provide so much prosperity. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's hard to imagine why the red team and the blue team continue to play partisan politics with this. Why not continue the minority government? We've seen, everybody pretty much agrees that the Justin Trudeau government could have kept going. They were supported by the NDP. The NDP, had some key demands that would have bettered the country, but Justin Trudeau plunged us into an election. The Green Party of Canada is asking for your support because, as you know, there is a climate emergency. We are the best party that has the best plans to actually get us out of that emergency, put everyone on a solid, income floor through a national guaranteed livable income. We're the only ones talking about eliminating poverty. I mean, they all voted to eliminate child poverty by the year 2000. Well, we're in 2021, and look where we're at. We need to remove the partisanship. I believe the Green Party of Canada is best placed to do that. If we are lucky enough to form government, we certainly would make open and accountable and transparent government available for everyone. Let's all work together. I thank Andrew Scheer specifically. My MP, Michael Cram, has yet to show up at a debate. I hope he shows up tonight. But I really thank Andrew for participating. It's it's a pleasure to hear his viewpoints on all the issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Mr. Doucette, you have the opportunity to wrap up your submissions.
Yes, you know what, I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, if I can call you that, for allowing me and SUMA to have the opportunity. I want to congratulate the other candidates for coming forward and for expounding on their vision, their party's visions. And I would say that, you know, DP offer Canadians a real choice. They offer a real choice. You know, while some of the other parties are worried about how big corporations and the wealthy can keep on rolling that path forward, the NDP actually put forward positions that are going to average Canadians. And as an example, pharmacare and an enhancement of Medicare is something that I think, you know, on the doorsteps, people are really saying is important to them. Families, the health of their children, and the health of their seniors is something that they want to see. An annual basic income is something else that the NDP have put forward. And I think Mr. Lau says it correctly. You know, you need to invest in people. Also, the other thing I would say, we all talk about working together. And this is an issue right now. Right now, we've got over 7,000 unmarked graves of Indigenous children. And nobody really is saying anything about. They're going to look to deal with the people that have caused this problem and try to work for everybody, including a different party of the average Canadian. And I look forward to your support, and so do all the other NDP candidates across this country, because we're going to work hard for average Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. Mr. Kletchko, it's your opportunity to wrap up.
Sorry. I'd like to, before I get back to that, I would like to suggest that the Build Back Better program will only work with a hand up, not a handout. I can't say that enough. We've got to give people the respect that they desire in order to make our communities viable. This was an excellent discussion on our views on how to make Canada an independent and just nation. Once again, I can't say enough about it. This format, maybe they should try and use this type of format in the federal debate. And perhaps this time they can let the other party join in and make it even more fair. I would certainly look forward to repeating this form of discussion in the future. Our party, the PPC party, we want to protect free speech and expression. We want freedom and liberty. We want accountable public finance. We want to address Indigenous issues, veterans, refugees, pipelines, and our foreign policy that is disgusting. I really enjoyed this format, and I hope other people take example of what we just said, because this that happened right now is freedom of speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kletchko. Ms. Hjertaas, your opportunity.
Thank you so much. And thank you to SUMA for organizing, and to all my fellow candidates for participating. It's great to have everybody here to hear diverse views, and everyone to have done so, politely. So I saw the next two questions were about climate change and support for businesses. So I just want to really briefly address that. To help farmers address climate change, we have a whole program about helping them sequester carbon, which I'm super excited about because my family are farmers, and that's something my uncle has been doing for more than 10 years, is measuring how much carbon he's sequestering. And so I certainly invite you to read our environmental plan about that. And in terms of support for businesses, there are a lot of them, but it's at page 24 of our platform. So yeah, that question goes to check that out. And I just want to note, since it came up again, only individuals can donate in federal politics. It's been that way for almost 20 years. Corporate and union donations are illegal in federal politics. That's not the case in every province. So moving on to closing, ultimately this election is about what kind of future we want and how we're going to build back from the pandemic. And so the Liberal approach is being to put people first. We've really seen that through the pandemic with supports for individuals, supports for businesses, supports for communities, getting the vaccines, supplying PPE, making sure that everybody stayed safe, that people weren't losing their homes, people weren't losing their businesses. And I think that's critical. And now we get to decide if that's the approach that we still want moving forward, or if we want a different approach. And ultimately, there's the other key issues that we're addressing, like climate change. And the Liberal plan is independently reviewed as the one that's going to be the most effective at actually meeting our targets and reducing emissions at the lowest cost. And also at doing things like eliminating poverty. We've already lifted 900,000 seniors out of poverty and 300,000 children with the benefits that we've offered. And so we're proposing to continue to address that with things like $10 a day daycare. And so really this election is about the kind of future that we want. And the Liberal Party is proposing one where we put people first and take action on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hjertaas. Mr. Scheer, I'll look to you for your closing comments.
Well, the Liberal approach has actually been to put their friends first. Remember, during the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, Justin Trudeau took the time to stop and make sure that his friends at the We organization received a sole source contract worth almost $1 billion. He's given sole source contracts to former Liberal MPs. It's just been outrageous how much patronage and cronyism he's managed to squeeze in during the time of a pandemic. Something else the Liberal candidate said about banks doing very well. Yeah, that's right. Banks have been doing very well, in large part thanks to the Bank of Canada's creation of new money that works through the banking system, and the big banks get to take their share right off the top. Bank shares in this country since the pandemic hit have almost tripled because they're making so much profit off of all the new money printing that's going on. This election is really coming down in Saskatchewan to which party will always be on our province's side. When you look at which party is on the side of farmers, it's the Conservative Party, fighting for real drought relief and fighting to open new markets and reduce input costs for producers. We're on side for energy workers. On Saskatchewan's side, we've always fought for Canadian pipelines, believing that our country needs more Western Canadian energy, not less of it. We should stop importing foreign oil into Eastern markets. That's what the Trudeau Liberals have done. We will not attack small businesses, small towns, small communities in Saskatchewan. It's the small businesses that keep those communities vibrant. And the Liberal attack on small business devastated many in the small business community. And of course, we're on side for Saskatchewan when it comes to a fair deal. Unlike the Trudeau Liberals, we will not claw back healthcare transfers. We will accept Saskatchewan's environment plan and treat all provinces fairly, not dividing the country, not playing off one region against the other. So on September 20th, I'm asking for you to support your local Conservative candidate so that we can keep fighting for our province.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. That ends today's forum. Thank you to all our candidates for joining us and answering the questions that are important to our municipal leaders. And thank you to all our registrants for their insightful questions. I apologize we weren't able to get to all of them. I hope the forum was educational for all of you as it was for me. I will now pass the floor back to Stephanie to close this session.
Thank you, Mayor Albers, and thank you to the candidates for participating in today's forum. Don't forget to watch for future webinars in the municipal update and member emails. The next webinar will be happening on September 28th with registration happening soon. We'll be providing a recording of this forum to all registrants in the next few days. A poll should be popping up on your screen, so please take a few minutes to fill out this form to let us know how we did today and what you're looking for from future SUMA webinars. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.